All right, welcome everyone to this week's meeting of the Clyde Sukeforth chapter of SABR. I am Bruce McClure, the chapter chair, and we always hold our meetings in conjunction with the Gardner-Waterman chapter of SABR in Vermont, Dr. Clayton Truder, chair. I had a few things to go over before we get started tonight. The first thing I want to do is thank the Elysian Fields chapter and their president, Donna Muscarella, for their hospitality this past weekend. We went down there to their SABR Day festivities at the Youth Museum at Hinchliffe Stadium in Paterson, New Jersey. We got a chance to view the movie Pride and Prejudice. There was a panel discussion afterwards and an awful lot of great SABR talk, baseball talk. 60 people at this event. It was a big success. And Donna, you are to be commended for what you did. Kudos to you. And we appreciate your hospitality. We'll see you next month at the Yogi Berra Museum when we come back to give you a hand with your next event. Jeff, talk to me. What's going on with the podcast this week?
Oh, thank you very much. Yes. This week, this Saturday, we're dropping a podcast featuring Wally Backman of the 86 Mets. But if you want to go back to February 1st, we have a great podcast with a writer named Tom Hoffarth. I mean, it's a great interview, and I know we're all going to enjoy hearing it from him tonight.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. Now, many of you have heard about our chapter project where we are going to have a little SABR festivities at the Nashua Silver Knights game at the end of May. You got information on that in the Monday message that came out this week, but I have more news that came out this week. Out of the clear blue sky, just by happenstance, for lack of better, I got an email from the New Hampshire Fisher Cats Tuesday morning, and they are graciously giving us a table to display SABR and what it's all about at a game this year. And those of us who have been involved with this chapter project are going to be expanding that to 2 venues, the second of which we're still getting a date for. So watch your email because there's more coming out about that. But that's big news because, as many of you know, we tried to work with the Fisher Cats last year and it really didn't take off. But with their new front office this year, they're all in. So let's get to work. All right. Oh, Ben Abel's here. Ben, go.
Yeah, I caught that. And my wife was talking about your visit to see the Fisher Cats, because we had Michael Nice how long ago, and then he left the Fisher Cats, right?
That's correct. He left. He lasted 1 year and that was it.
We're connected on LinkedIn. But if you guys want to fly to beautiful Vancouver, Canada, you could see the step below the New Hampshire Fisher Cats. You could see the Vancouver Canadians in action starting April 15th.
That's right. And the Vancouver Canadians have something that the New Hampshire Fisher Cats don't have.
What's that?
3-foot hot dog.
Thank you for the reminder.
All right, let's get on with our feature presentation this evening. What do you say? When Vin Scully passed away in 2022, the city of Los Angeles lost its soundtrack. If you were able to deliver a eulogy for him, what might it include? What impact did he have on you? What did you carry forward from his legacy? 67 essayists, one representing each season of his career, calling games for the Dodgers from 1950 through 2016, reflect on the ways his professional and private life influenced them. The contributions include a range of stories and remembrances from those who knew and followed him. The consensus of the contributions is that Scully's actions spoke louder than his well-recognized words. This collection of essays includes fellow broadcasters as well as historians, players, journalists, celebrities, and others connected to the game of baseball, with each piece introduced by the book's editor. Readers can consider Scully's life through common themes: his sincerity, his humility, his professionalism, his passion for his faith, his devotion to his family, his insistence on remembering and giving context to important moments in the history of not just the game, but the world in general, all wrapped up in a gift for weaving storytelling with accurate reporting, fellowship with performance art, humor, and connection. Tom Hoffarth has been an Associated Press award-winning journalist for more than 40 years in Southern California, focusing on sports and the media. He has written for many publications and is a co-author with Tom Kelly of Tales from the USC Sideline, a collection of the greatest Trojan stories ever told. And he is here tonight to talk about the new book that he has edited called Perfect Eloquence. Tom Hoffarth, welcome to Northern New England, good sir. How are you?
Good. We have rare cold weather here today in Southern California, which is nice after the rain, after the fires and everything. But we don't know how to handle this. So I've been inside all day. I'm afraid to go out.
Okay, so when you say cold, what's the temperature?
40.
All right, well, that's all we have for this evening. We're going to get on
40 Fahrenheit.
40 degrees. 40 degrees is the
It's a
heat
brisk
wave up here
41.
right now.
It's a brisk
41
41.
is like actually
Oh,
pleasant.
man. I'm expecting an ice storm and more snow. You're a nice guy, for heaven's sake.
41.
Oh, man. I'll tell you what.
Look, I've got my jacket on. It's
Tom, tell me a little bit about yourself. Let's get started by learning a little bit about the editor here. Tell us about your path to this book.
I was born in Los Angeles the same year that the original Los Angeles Angels were born, 1961. So I really gravitated to them, knowing the Dodgers were still, the team that had just moved here. My mom and dad grew up in Los Angeles also. They were excited to see something besides the Pacific Coast League come in. So for, my lifetime growing up in Southern California, it was always Vin Scully on the radio, on the television for 6 games a year from San Francisco. And it was just the soundtrack of our lives. When I got into sports writing at USC, I was lucky enough to live close enough to Dodger Stadium so I could hop over there to games. But as a sports writer, I worked, starting in 1992, I started covering the sports and the media. So that allowed me more access to not just write about what I was watching on television, but to interview broadcasters and get the readers to know them better. And my first interview with Vin was 1992. And so that's a 30-year period until he passed away in 2022. And it was just an interesting access to a man who put everybody at ease as soon as they met him, made you feel like he was your friend because you had heard him for so long on the radio. But then as I got to see him in different contexts, talk to him about different things, I had this great collection of conversations so that when he had passed away, I wanted to try to figure out a way to honor him and to also let people know that he never wanted to write a book about himself. He wasn't the kind of person to draw attention to himself. And any other writer who had tried to do a book with him, he turned it down for all kinds of polite reasons. So now I felt like I could do it. I had the family's blessing. I had the publisher, University of Nebraska, got on board. And we just kind of put it together, starting with the stories that I had and then the stories that I was pulling from other people who wanted to write essays. And it just kind of snowballed into this 67 essays, which by some luck of karma was the number of seasons he broadcast for the Dodgers. And when the book was due on June 1st, that's what I went with. So it took about 10 months to come out. And luckily it came out during a season where the Dodgers won the World Series. So it picked up some more momentum. And now that this will be the 75th anniversary of Vin's first season of 1950, I'm going to be the keynote speaker at the 9 convention in Tempe, Arizona, in just a couple of weeks. And I hope to have people like Jaime Jarrín and Derek Hall and some other folks who did essays show up. If you're in the area, that'd be great to see you. But I had never been to the 9 gathering before. I went last year for the first time. I was blown away how much fun it was. And I would have been coming back this year anyway. And they said, hey, why don't you just do some presentations? So I've been working on that part. So a lot of this is still fresh in my head right now. And as far as getting these people to write essays, it was funny because I had sort of figured out different topics I wanted to cover. I really wanted to cover what kind of a family man he is and how humble he is and how gracious he is and all these great thank you notes that he wrote to people and how he maintained his humility and living in Hollywood, which can get your ego blown up. So I started just picking through my files of people I could call with Bob Costas and Al Michaels and some other broadcasters. And it just kind of snowballed into this effect to where you should talk to this guy, you should talk to that guy. And there are so many people I wish I could have talked to. I just had such a tight deadline. I mean, Dan would be a great person. I want to hear his comments about Vin himself. But it was just such a gracious moment to be present and to do all this, and then see the book accepted, and then get to know Vin and his daughters and family, see them sort of embrace it, Peter O'Malley, and it's just so great to be part of this ride right now.
While I'm thinking of it, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question for our presenter, Tom Hoffarth, tonight, go down to the bottom of the screen and hit the react button. You'll see another button marked raise hand. This is a conversational style of meeting this evening, so just raise your hand at any time and we'll get you in to ask questions of our presenter, Tom Hoffarth, tonight. Tom, you were the one who selected the essays for this book, correct?
Right.
How did you go about selecting what was the process to get these essays? Did you just pick up the phone and call a bunch of friends? Did you have people in mind for certain essays? How'd you do it?
Yeah, I had people in mind because I knew we kind of had to cover his broadcasting career. You can't do a book about him without explaining a lot of things. So I created a timeline, which basically, to me, helped put some structure to it. But because this wasn't an academic-based book, it's not a tribute book either. It was more of an appreciation. So once I got that part framed, and I kind of flooded out my Rolodex. I think that's still what it's called, and told people, if you could write a eulogy for Vin Scully, what would it be? What would you want him and his family to know that you took away from being around him, and what did you appreciate? And for me, it was his art of storytelling, because it got me through the process of wanting to be a journalist, but not wanting to be a broadcaster. Just so the storytelling, the format of the storytelling, and how he knew that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and just all the structure he had to this. And my amazement in how he could fit this between 1, 2, and 3 outs in an inning. He knew the platform so well, and he knew the cadence and the beats to everything, what to leave out of the story, what to expand it. And so for me, that's what was important. But it was also important for me to let people know what kind of a family man he was, and his religious life, because he didn't talk a lot about it, but I'd seen it firsthand at Catholic masses that I went to with him. And so as I was getting through different notes I wanted to hit, somebody would bring up, his celebrity, and someone would bring up his influence. And so I got 9 subjects. And so from the essays, I kind of just divided them into different piles of 9. I just had these buckets. And some people wanted to write about the friendship they had with him. And some wanted to write about the time when a family member was sick and Vin had called them or wrote a note to them. So it all kind of fell together, and it all kind of evened out. There wasn't one real heavy topic or another. So I was just kind of pleased how it went together and who was available. And what I also found was, when I put this word out, who wants to write? A lot of people don't like to write, but they want to tell you. So I had to sort of interview them, form their essay, get it back to them, let it approve it, go back and forth. And in some cases, people who had absolutely no time, I said, let me collect what you've said about Vin that's available on the internet in different videos. Let me pull that together, send it to you, you approve it, and we'll get it. So at least you're in the book with your thoughts. So in some cases, not too many, thankfully, but in most cases, people actually did write their essays. And it was hard to do for a lot of people. Writing is not easy. It's not the first thing that people like to do. So whatever I could do to kind of help massage that part. And it got emotional for a lot of people. And I don't blame them, because this was the assignment. If you could do a eulogy, what would it be? So that came to be why it was called an appreciation. And like I said, for 67 essays, there could be 200 or 300 more that I wish I could have done. But what I did in the meantime was set up a website, It's called vinscullyappreciationbook.com. And on that website, I put in more essays that people have submitted to me. And I've also put updates on different materials I used in the book. And it's just become sort of a living, breathing organism of how the book has progressed. So I know you guys really understand and appreciate how a book comes together. And I really appreciated University of Nebraska for being such amenable to this, especially with their volume of baseball books. I knew that they would do it right, and they did. The only struggle I sort of had with this was conforming to their academic sort of structure of writing with footnotes and photographs, in the middle. And so I talked them into a lot of things. I talked them into scattering the photos to go with the essays. I talked them into not doing a really detailed appendix and all those things. So I kind of was a little more vague, and they really worked with me on that. And I appreciated that. And then when it was getting edited, the editor was getting a little heavy-handed with the essays. And I said, no, you can't touch the essays. This is what they wrote. I mean, please correct grammar and facts, but you can't mess with their sentence structure. That's what makes them who they are. So I think we had a great understanding of that. And as I was just really pleased the way it came out, and then the way it just ramped up right away with how people saw it and appreciated it, and bought several copies for friends, and they're still doing so.
I want to go to our friend Dan Evans for a minute. Dan, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. I'm trying to convince my dog it's not time to go out.
Well, tell your dog that you've got some thoughts about Vin Scully that you'd like to share. You were with the Dodgers for how long?
4 years.
Tell us about your interactions and your time with Vince.
Tom, I can't wait to read it because he's probably the best human being I met in my baseball career. I was very lucky. Don Drysdale introduced me to him like 3 or 4 years into my career when he was doing the game of the week. And, Don was a great friend doing White Sox baseball. So when I came to the Dodgers in 2001, I already had a relationship with Vinny, which really helped me. And my first day on the job, we were in Houston. I got on the bus and he said, Danny, sit right next to me. We've been doing it for so long. Now we can do it officially. The most humble, kind superstar I've ever met. A fascinating man, so inquisitive, with an ability to go through a recollection of 60 plus years in the game. And he could tell you, so many things, as Tom's going to write about, I'm sure, of things you wouldn't believe, folks. I mean, just wouldn't believe. And when many people are mailing it in, he was actually stepping on the gas pedal even harder. I was fascinating at how hard he worked. He would ask questions all the time, but oh, what a joy to go out to lunch or dinner with him, sit with him on planes, on buses. He helped me bring a lot of the Dodger legends back to the franchise. Tom, I'm sure you're aware of that. We recruited and went after people, and who's going to say no to Vin Scully for lunch on a road trip? And it was an extraordinary time. I mean, Duke Snyder, Sandy Koufax, Fernando Valenzuela. It was a remarkable experience. But honestly, folks, he was exactly who you thought he was. So genuine, so incredible. And if I could tell a quick story, Tom and Bruce, I hope you don't mind. Can I tell?
Not at all.
Okay. So he meets my little girls. At the time, they were like 10 and 7. And he finds out, let's just say through sources, that my daughters are staying up, most notably my oldest one, to watch games. They're living in Chicago still. And they're watching Dodger games till midnight when the game's over. And Vinny, in the middle of a game, says, okay, it's 9 o'clock. Sarah and Andy Evans, it's time for you to go to sleep. Your dad's got it from here. we're up a couple runs. We've got it from here. When you wake up in the morning, check the score. I mean, my phone blew up. They both called me. They're both laying in bed going, Dad, Mr. Scully told me to go to bed. What do I do? And I said, well, it's up to you. You decide what you want to do, but you should probably listen to Mr. Scully. So the game was over. I walk up to him. I forget where we were. I think we were in Milwaukee. And he said, so I hope I helped you a little bit tonight. And I said, yeah, I got 2 phone calls before you were even done talking. And he said, well, he said, I know what it's like. They got to get ready for school the next day. And I just said, Vinny, that's like the voice of God. I said,
Oh, man, I was just thinking the same thing, Dad.
Yeah, you can't say no. And so he left. So then when the 2 girls met him a couple days later, they came up, they gave him big hugs. And Vinny said to one of them, said, so are you going to bed at 9 o'clock? And she said, only if we're winning. And I just said, wow, okay. But Tom, I can't wait to read it. He was just an incredible human being. And I really cherished my time with him. He became a phenomenal friend long after I wasn't with the Dodgers. And it's probably the person of all my relationships in baseball over 40 years that I cherish the most. And I just want you all to know, Tom knew him well. Vinny loved Tom. And I thought it was really cool when I first heard of the book. I thought it's great when somebody who knows somebody really well writes a book about him, because then you get the genuine personal touch. So Tom, great work. Can't wait to read it.
Oh, thanks so much, Dan. Do you have note cards from Vin?
I do.
Aren't they great?
I saved every one of them.
The penmanship is exquisite. He wrote this one, and I was so happy that Fred Clare had let me use it. When Fred was let go from the Dodgers, Vin wrote him this just exquisite note, and so that whole note is in the book as well.
Yeah, and I have 6 bottles of champagne from 6 division championships all over here, but I have a 7th one, and it was the day I got the job in Houston. He had a bottle, and he brought it up to me on the bus, and he said, he goes, don't drink it tonight. Well, I'm not going to tell you not to drink it. It depends how the score goes, but he says, enjoy it. And he says, and open it someday when you think it's appropriate. And I just decided to never open it. It's penmanship was unbelievable. And like Tom said, he had these note cards. So I stole the idea when I got to the Dodgers, and I had my own note cards printed. And Vinny comes up to me one day when I was writing a note on the airplane. He says, well, we left-handers think alike, don't we? And I said, well, if you notice, Vinny, the only difference in the 2 cards is my name instead of your name. And folks, he was an amazing guy. And I just can't believe I got to spend all those rides with him. It was joyous. It really was. It was a wonderful time. And his ability to tell stories didn't stop with baseball, which was, I just loved his stories about, walks to the ballpark and things like that. And I will never forget the man. He's really just an unbelievable, indelible memory for me.
Wow. Gosh. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate you so.
You're welcome. I'm going to go take my dog out now, guys. It's 4 degrees with 10 inches of snow. So
thank God you and I are in the same boat.
Yeah. So Tom, 40's not cool. Okay.
I know.
Right. Thanks, Dan.
But I mean, Dan just explained exactly what the experience was like. Every day I get to talk to people like that who would confirm and go another step about things that Vin had done for them and way he touched his life. And it wasn't just baseball. In fact, I did a USC journalism class during it was still during COVID, so it was a Zoom call just like this. And when I got into the class, the only video that was on was me, the professor, and that was it. And everybody's name I could just see on the screen. And one of the questions the professor asked me about halfway in is about Vin and his family and stuff. And I look at the screen and I noticed one of the names is Michael Scully. And I said, hey, by the way, who's Michael Scully? And his screen comes on and he says, yeah, I'm Vin's grandson. And he goes and tells a story about how, yeah, grandpa really liked football better than baseball. And it was just phenomenal. Again, I wish I could have talked to him for the book, but it was just, every time I do these kind of gatherings, I learn something new and something that's really touches the heart. And it's to Vin's legacy that I want to keep this going, because people from 10 or 20 or 30 years from now may say, oh, this guy's the greatest announcer, or this guy's the greatest at this. And then you go, I got to have this all in writing right now so that I can say, well, read this, see what you think after you read this.
Tom, we got some questions from the gallery. You mind if I go to them?
Absolutely.
Ben Abel, you've had your hand up for a while. Ben, you there?
Here,
He's coming.
just gotta turn my screen on because
There he is.
so some people are yelling in the background. So yeah, I had a question for Tom, because what I did a few years ago during the pandemic and a bit after was subscribe to the Los Angeles Times newsletter, because I was looking for updates on the LA Dodgers. And then when Vin Scully died, there's a lot of stuff in there. So I've never actually listened to Vin Scully call a baseball game. So I'd be interested to read the book. And so that was really not so much a question as a comment. Right.
Well,
I've
good.
never
I
had the
appreciate that.
opportunity, So, it's just like, oh, okay.
So my dad was born in 1908. So he got to see the evolution of baseball from the early 1900s to what is essentially the modern game today. But he lived a lot of that history that Vin lived. And when he would talk about baseball and its television broadcasts in its infancy, he would repeatedly bring up Vin Scully. And he would discuss just how comforting and beautiful that voice was to listen to. And it only enhanced the experience of a baseball game on television or on the radio. And I mean, frankly, his call of Aaron's 7:15, which was the very first baseball game I watched. My father plopped me down in front of the television and said, you're watching this, and I'll explain to you why. Aaron was his favorite player. But his call of Aaron's 7:15 is actually superior to Milo Hamilton's. As far as
absolutely.
Yeah. It tells this beautiful story. You can find it on YouTube. Go out there, search Vin Scully, Hank Aaron 7:15. It'll come up. Listen to that call. It's pretty amazing. And as a matter of fact, I believe my wife used that call as a basis for a found poetry entry in the new book that has been collated and edited by Eric Poulin called Here Comes the Pizza. And that'll be coming out very soon. His debut is going to be the end of March, if I recall that correctly. I want to go to Troy Olszewski. Did I say it right, Troy?
I wanted to ask, you did say it right, in case you
Thank
didn't see my nodding. I wanted to ask if there was anything you wish, like anything that wasn't covered in the essays or that was cut that you wish would be in the book, if that makes sense.
I think I got it all in there. And
Oh,
if there is a wish, it's like that. It's because you want to do everything. It's hard to write a book that they say it's only going to be 48,000 words or something, or whatever. It's 256 pages. So you've got your structure there, and you don't want to turn a reader off by the size of something. So the only thing I wish I could get in, I'm putting now on the website, and it's usually different stories that I'd forgot about, or just one I came across the other day was the New York Times had done a story about him in 2016, his last season. And they talked about how Fordham University had this recording of Vin Scully as a 21-year-old. And some guy had put it away in safekeeping and he couldn't find it, but he knows it's safe somewhere. But the recording was of Vin narrating an Easter pageant. And as you listen to it, you understand Vin is playing the voice of God in this Easter pageant as the narrator.
Oh my gosh.
As the thing is going on. And it was just, you knew right away that this was calling for him. And so that's a story I'm going to put back up on the website and then try to find out from Fordham whether that thing still exists. But it touched me because what I experienced was on Sunday mornings, if the Dodgers had a home game, and it's across baseball, the Christian Athletes for Christ has an organization where they do a Catholic mass, usually like at 9:30 if it's a 1 o'clock game. So at Dodger Stadium, they would meet down in the press room, and Vin would be the lector. So Vin would get up and read the New Testament and the Old Testament. The priest would read the gospel. But obviously, when he's reading these Bible passages, that the sports writer next to me is elbowing me and go, "This is how God would have wanted to hear it," because it was. And so I would try to turn on my phone recorder just to capture some of this. And it's just this muffled recording. But if you think about it, it's really the Bible as being a bunch of stories. And Vin was just storytelling again. So he knew the pace and the cadence and what to emphasize. And it turned out that he ended up doing a CD of the Rosary, the Catholic Rosary, so that now you can really hear him recite prayers and things. And it is, when you talk about how his voice is comforting and so lyrical, that was part of it, and a big part of it, in that he could read almost anything and make it sound entertaining. One of the San Diego Padres PR guys one year gave him a list of groceries and had him read it aloud, and you can find that on the internet. A carton of eggs, and it's phenomenal. You can't repeat it because but it sounds perfect. When you say someone could recite the phone book, I don't know if anybody knows what that means anymore, but if you can read a grocery list and make that be an entertaining thing, it's phenomenal to hear those things captured. And again, we're lucky to be in an era where a lot of the broadcasts are captured and now are available on YouTube. I can't find anything really earlier than 1953 that he did. I wish I had something more from 1950, but his voice is almost the same as it was then as it was at the end. He's just a little bit slower, but it's the same rhythm and the same ability to communicate. And for a lot of people, you could probably take a Harry Carey early and later and notice a huge difference. I think with Vin, it was just this person who maintained the same sort of ability to storytell, and whether it was learning it from Red Barber, I think the thing he learned from Red Barber was really about not being a homer, being a reporter, and be honest with the people. So we were lucky as well that he grew up at the knee of Red Barber for a few years, and then he became the poet laureate. So. To answer your question, yeah, I have a lot of stuff, and I'm still putting it on the website because I keep coming across new things.
Stepped on you there for a second, Tom.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Steve Ditmore put a link in the chat to the Vin Scully grocery list reading. So
all right.
See that in the chat. It's on ESPN.com. Click that link. You can go out to that, save that link. It is fantastic listening. It really is.
Go
ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were calling on me too because I have my hand up, Bruce.
Do it. Jump in, man. Go.
Sorry.
Go. Let's go. Steve Ditmore, you're up.
So that was Andy Strasburg was the person for the Padres that did that. So I have two quick stories, Tom, and then a question for you. So I spent 14 years working at the University of Arkansas and got to know a fellow faculty member there named Zola Moon. And as Zola and I were talking one day, learned that is Wally Moon's daughter. And she relayed the story of, and I immediately told her about my Dodger fandom, having grown up in Westlake Village and done all those things. And she said, she told me the story of the time that the Dodgers, a bunch of players and Scully and everybody else came over to her house for a barbecue. And a wiffle ball game broke out. And so, of course, Vin Scully started broadcasting the wiffle ball game, which, is just a tremendous story and would have been amazing to have that recorded. The other thing is as a kid in the 70s growing up, you hear these stories about people who put their transistor radio under their pillow and fell asleep and all that.
That was
I had
me.
the exact opposite problem, which is my parents had that giant 1970s console radio record player thing in the living room, and I would want to listen to it in the living room, and that was the way that I consumed Vin Scully broadcasting the 1970s Dodgers and all of that. But those are my two quick stories. My question is, in your interactions with the Dodgers and the team over the years, what do the players think about Vin Scully? Do they recognize, or did they recognize, that they were playing and having their games broadcast by the best that ever did it?
Not too many. People were suggesting to me, "Oh, you got to get Clayton Kershaw to do an essay or something like that," and they don't really know him or have an interaction with him. So the two or three people that did, who I knew, one of them was Steve Garvey. And the reason Steve worked out well was because he told me a story about when he came up, it was either 68, 69, and he's playing third base. And he's having a bad day. If a ball gets past him, he kicks another one. And because everybody had the transistor radios in the stands, he can hear Vin Scully. His voice is just in the background of everything going on in the crowd roar. And he can hear Vin say, oh, Steve Garvey, he's a young player and he's trying hard. And if we give him a chance, he's going to do all right. Something like that. We should don't get hard on him. And Steve said right there, Mr. Scully saved my career. He gave the audience some sort of context. And another one I remember was Jerry Royce, who talked about that same phenomenon. He was on the mound pitching once for the Cardinals, and he heard Vin go into a story, and Jerry said he got off the rubber, took the rosin back, threw it down. He was trying to delay the at-bat so that Vin could finish the story. So he knew what was going on. The presence of mind, he could hear what these things were happening. So like I said, there weren't that many players. Only if they got into broadcasting afterwards, like Eric Karros, Nomar Garciaparra, they had a better appreciation for Vin, mostly because of the craft. And Eric grew up listening to Dodger games, so some of them had that opportunity, but most of them didn't. Most of them didn't listen to him as a kid. Ann Myers told me she wasn't listening or watching Dodger games. She was playing. So a lot of times they had no real background on Vin's impact until they got to know him as a person, which was even better for the book because of the stories they could tell. So it was interesting to me how you would think that those are the kind of people that it would have an impact on, and it really is very few.
Garvey came up for 3 games in 69 and played 34 in 70. He was a part-timer till 73.
Right.
How did you gather the essays for this book? Did you have a certain way you wanted to arrange them, or are they just done alphabetically by author? How did you arrange the book?
Well, once I figured out the 9 topics I wanted to cover, it became 9 innings. I just called each chapter an inning, so that was another kind of fun thing to do. But as each person turned in an essay, I had an idea of what they might write about. Like some would know him as a broadcaster, some would know him for the way they influenced. So I just had to sort of take it when the essay came in. The only requirement is, I said, just try to keep it to 1,000 words. If you have to write longer, we'll work on cutting it down. And then it just sort of, it found its way to one of these topics. And it was a lot easier than I thought it would be. And nobody sort of went out of the boundaries. And there's some overlap on some certain things, which I expected. But when I did a chapter about Vin and history, his love of history, I knew I could go to somebody like Josh Rawitz, who's now the president of the Hall of Fame, and to Tim Mead, who was the previous president, who both knew Vin very well, and they knew about his love of history. And I went to a couple of academic professors, Mike Green, who teaches history at UNLV. So in some cases, I asked certain people to write about a certain topic if I thought that was going to fit better. But in most cases, I just kind of let them do what they want, and then I figured out where to put it.
Ken Edwards, did you have your hand up? Did you want to ask a question or make a comment?
I did. Thank
Go.
you, Bruce. Thanks so much. A couple of very quick questions. I am a huge Red Barber fan as well, and I love listening to Red. You referenced him. What other credits did Vin Scully give to Red Barber as a mentor? Is Red discussed elsewhere in the book by any of the essayists? And then finally, are there some hidden Vin Scully play-by-play games? I'm almost an addict when it comes to the play-by-play YouTube, radio, games. And I wondered if you knew of any hidden Vin Scully complete games that are not captured on YouTube, and where one would find those. Thanks.
Sure. I have a friend who works for the Game Show Network, and he's been able to find a lot of this stuff. He's a big Vin Scully fan, and he became a Vin fan because Vin did a lot of game shows during his time. So he got photographs and he kept track of, he documents. So he has lists of all the guests who have been on all these shows and things. And he does a very good job of scouring the internet and finding things. And he might have sent me one recently. I was going to see, it was a complete game from 1969, I think it was. But I think YouTube channel really is the best place to find things right now. I wish there was a better resource. I don't know if the radio stations kept a lot of it. It's mostly private collectors, and in fact, I think the reason why the 1965 Sandy Koufax Perfect Game exists is because of a fan just happened to put it on his tape recorder. So a lot of these things you might find hit or miss. And the funny part too is Bob Costas wrote about as a kid getting this anthology of baseball, and the transcript of Scully's calling that game is in the book, the ninth inning of the perfect game. And Bob said he read it and he thought it was a poem. He thought it was somebody wrote this down, not knowing that this was actually spoken words. So that to me sort of shows the essence of trying to collect as much of this as possible, because there are so many stories that you find snippets in these different games that you can find of things that just come to Vin's mind, go out there, and maybe you get lost forever just because nobody captures it. And so much of these things, in talking to Vin, you would just say a guy's name and it would trigger a story, and that was the best part about it. The worst part was that you weren't there to capture it. So you tried as much as you could when you were talking to him to make sure your tape recorder was on, whether he knew it or not. And as far as talking to people, one of the people that Peter O'Malley referred to me was a guy named Tom Vellante, who probably is no more than a year or two older than Vin and is still alive in New York. Tom was assigned to be the producer of the games in 1952, I think. And so he worked with Red and Vin. They overlapped. And the only reason Tom got this job was because his account, he was in the marketing for a big marketing company, and their two big sponsors were Schaefer Beer and Lucky Strike cigarettes. And those were the two major sponsors of the Dodgers. So he was really the producer who made sure that those ads got into the game. He didn't really do much else, which is kind of what a producer does anyway, whether people know that or not. So Tom gave me some really good things. I interviewed him, and then I formed it into an essay about how the things that Vin learned from Red. And it really was, one of the things was that Red didn't want Vin to fraternize much with the players. He don't share a beer with them. It'll get you in trouble, because the Dodgers had a broadcaster at the time who was having alcoholic problems, and he didn't want Vin to fall in that trap. So
Connie
while
Desmond.
Vin, yeah, Connie. So while Vin had, he was 22 years old, still learning the craft, but also learning about what life was. He still lived at home with his mom, and the parts that Red really kind of walked him through in that short time, because Red was not with the team after 53, I think. Vin really had to absorb all that stuff and then become his own man. But so some historians will say, yeah, Vin thought that Red was a little hard on him, but I think he appreciated it. It was a lot of tough love that Red didn't want. Red saw that this was a budding star and didn't want him to fall by the wayside. And one of the reasons Nebraska did pick up this book was because there was this really nice big biography on Red Barber that Nebraska published a year or two ago. And there's a lot of Vin in the book, not too much, but they thought that this book and that book, and they also have the rights to Kurt Smith's biography on Vin, Pull Up a Chair. So now the publisher has those three things to kind of have as their account of that time period. So I think it kind of fit with that. My book didn't have to be a history book or a biography. It just kind of fit nicely. So I know that Vin actually, when Red passed away, Vin left to go to his funeral. And so he made sure that happened. But yeah, without Red, I don't think there's a Vin in long.
Right. Thank you for your wonderful efforts.
Sure. And the other aspect of that too is when Red Barber hired Vin Scully, it was because Ernie Harwell left to take the Giants job, and the Giants were Vin's favorite team. And I had asked Ernie later about that. I go, how about that? How about the crossroads there? If you had stayed with the Dodgers, if Vin went to the Giants, the team he would have loved, I mean, how different would baseball be, right?
Right. David Lipman, how you doing, Dave?
Hi. I'll lower my hand first. I'd like to ask you, Vin Scully made a lot of highly memorable calls in the course of his career. I will never forget the Game 6 of the 1986 World Series, in which he, and for me, the most interesting thing about it was that he followed Red Barber's dictum of not talking against a crowd, which stood out to me as a longtime Yankee fan, against Howard Cosell, who couldn't shut up over Reggie Jackson's third home run.
Don't hold back, Dave. Don't hold back.
The only good thing I think my comments on my view of Howard Cosell is the same as Dick Young's. Here's a man who changed his name, wears a rug, and says he tells it like it is. Anyway, I've often wondered, as you're the expert, the call of Koufax's perfect game, the call of Game 6 of the 86 World Series, I regard as his two best. What other calls by Scully, and of course the Aaron home run in 74, I'm sorry, three of them, are there any other calls that he made that really stand out to you as being, his most memorable? Because I know he had so many of them, but just a bunch. And you don't have to rate them, you don't have to rank them. I never say who's somebody says who's your top, who's the best right fielder of all time. I say too many to name, but I'd just like to hear a few of the ones you think stand out that should be remembered.
Oh, absolutely. When the Dodgers won the World Series in 1955, after losing for so many years, at the end of the game, he just said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the Brooklyn Dodgers are champions of the world."
That's right. He did.
That's all he said. And he said, you know what? If I had tried to say anything more, so I would have cried, because he knew the emotions of the moment and all the players, and Gil Hodges was his favorite guy, and he just knew that this meant so much to all of them. So when you think about that recording of that is still used on Dodger broadcasts today as this sort of retrospective, going into the game. So that's why it's kind of funny. The 1988 World Series Game 1 Gibson homer, the reason it has an interesting, he obviously had some great words that he used live. I don't think you can plan that. But the fact that he knew in the 9th inning to tell Harry Coyle, the NBC producer, before the game, before this starts, pan down the Dodger dugout. I just want you to show that Kirk Gibson's not even on the bench. And so Scully, in some way, directed this whole incident. I mean, because if he doesn't do that, Gibson doesn't say, horse's ass, I'm going to come out and play, and he's not taking swings in the clubhouse, and he doesn't come out. So I don't think that was Vin's intention. He was just trying to point out that this was it. And visually, you could see the dugout had nobody there. And to me, the funny part is how people confuse his call with Jack Buck's. Jack, who basically says, I don't believe what I just saw.
Mm-hmm.
When Vin really just said, in the year of the improbable, the impossible has happened. But Vin had so many great lines, just building the drama to that. You talk about the roll of the dice and just all of this great, when you surprise Vin, the audience really picks up on why that's important. To me, the most poignant thing he ever said on the radio, I didn't hear it, but I've heard recordings of it. So in 1959, there was Roy Campanella night at the LA Coliseum. And basically, the Yankees and Dodgers are playing. There's 93,000 people. It's a charity event for Roy Campanella. And at one point in the game, they turn out all the lights and everybody holds up a cigarette lighter, a candle. And Vin says, this is what Vin says on the broadcast, perhaps the most beautiful and dramatic moment in the history of sports. Let there be a prayer for every light. And wherever you are, maybe you in silent tribute to Campanella can also say a prayer for his well-being. And I don't do it justice by repeating it. It's transcript, but when you hear him say that, you just get goosebumps because of him again capturing the moment and then putting context to the moment and putting a caption on something that you just, it takes your breath away. So between that, the Larson perfect game, little roller behind third base, like you said, the NFC Championship game from 1982, the catch, Dwight Clark from Joe Montana.
Not a football fan.
Well, he's had a lot of golf calls too that are pretty famous, but those would be the ones. And I would agree, if I would have ranked them, the Aaron game was the most historic in a lot of ways, and he added so much depth and history to that moment. I was 12 or 13 years old and playing my own. I was playing a game that night, a Pony Colt League game, and it was just dumb luck that the Dodgers were playing the Braves and the game was on national TV, but the Dodger broadcast was coming back to LA, so he was always in these great spots. And my argument in the book too is when he did the movie For Love of the Game with Kevin Costner, and he's describing Costner as a Detroit Tiger aging pitcher trying to throw this perfect game at Yankee Stadium. So much of that's ad-libbed. They gave him lines to say, and he just basically said, "Show me the clip, and I'm gonna call it." And it's because he had this experience. He called Dennis Martinez's perfect game at Dodger Stadium. He called the Larson game. He called Jack Morris's no-hitter game in 1984 on national TV. So all these things sort of came into play with Vin. Just give Vin the microphone and let him go. And that movie clip may be one of his best calls either. And it's just a movie.
I had no idea until this instant. I had no idea that he ad-libbed that whole game.
Because they gave him a script and he said, this is not really believable. Let me give a shot. Let me have a shot at this. And he did it. And that's how he did it.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you get a chance to watch the movie again, just watch those Scully parts.
Actually, I haven't watched the movie. It's one of my many things I failed at.
How do you tell Vin Scully, no, you have to follow my script?
It was more like, give me a chance. It was like, give me a chance at this. You know,
Come on, coach, give me a chance.
give me a chance. The
That's
Costner's
crazy.
there, and Costner goes to the producer. That's pretty good. I think we should go with it.
Tom, tell us about the website.
Vin Scully appreciationbook.com is broken down to I think 10 different parts. So aside from those who want to contribute essays, I have a background on every one of the essayists. I have a background on the people who did blurbs for me, that was a lot of fun in itself. And then it's mostly a collection of, there is one or two essays that didn't make the book. I'll admit that. And a couple of them have to do with being compared to Vin Scully. There were two broadcasters who could have been in the book about how Vin influenced them. And they kind of found in the opposite way that Vin influenced them. They thought that people thought that they were trying to mimic Vin and imitate him. And that's not what they were doing at all. But they just grew up absorbing him and trying to do their own authentic broadcast. So it was on the website, I called them the 68th and 69th essays. And it's these two young broadcasters who kind of explain their experience by being compared to Vin. And if the book gets republished and expanded, I hope to put those in there. But I have a lot of fun just collecting notes and things too. And I collect just bits and pieces of more Vin memorabilia and photos that I put up there. So it's fun for me. If no one ever looks at it, I'm fine. I just have fun putting it together.
I just bookmarked the webpage.
Perfect. Isn't there a Japanese broadcaster that mimics Scully almost to perfection?
John Miller, the Giants broadcaster.
Yeah.
And you could probably Google John Miller, Vin Scully Japanese. And it's John Miller doing an impersonation of Vin Scully if he were doing Japanese baseball.
Oh, Lord. I thought there was also a Japanese broadcaster that
you probably could find one that at least lyrically who sounds like him.
I'll tell you. Now I have to go out and find that John Miller clip. Show them the book. Tell them how they can get it.
It's very accessible on Amazon.com. In fact, I think Amazon has dropped the price on it. But not the value, just the price. I mean, it should be available in most bookstores. Order at Barnes & Noble, Amazon. I love to support the local bookstores. So if you go to a local bookstore, ask them to order it for you, and they can find it pretty easy. And it's funny, they said, we're going to do a audio version of it too. And I said, that'd be great. How are you going to do that? And they realized they couldn't because
right,
not do it justice.
Right.
You can't, because they didn't realize that there was all these different voices who wrote the essays. They thought if it was a straight narrative, they could have done it. So I'm a little disappointed they couldn't do that. And I'm also disappointed they list me as the editor for as much as I did with the writing part of it. But I'm told that's another academic sort of perk. If they list you as the editor, that's a good thing. And I go, it doesn't feel like it, but okay.
Oh, okay. Last raps, Ben Abel, go.
I was going to say the first broadcasters I've heard for baseball, late 80s, early 90s, would be John Miller and Joe Morgan on Sunday Night Baseball, because I think we only got Sunday Night Baseball in Canada on TSN. And then we had Blue Jays games, and that was about it. So that was my first exposure to broadcasters that called baseball. And then Dave Niehaus from the Mariners. That's the other one.
Dave Niehaus. Those were the days. I'll tell you, Tom, this has been fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
There's nothing better than talking about Vin Scully. All right. There might not be much better than talking about Vin Scully, but we're going to give it a try next week. We're going to get together again Monday, February 17th, when Eric Gray will be with us to talk about his book, Backyards to Ballparks, More Personal Baseball Stories from the Stands and Beyond. The sign-up link is in the chapter meeting booklet sent out each Monday, and it's also available on the SABR events calendar at sabr.org/events. If you are on the automatic sign-up list, you will receive your link to access the meeting on Monday morning. And finally, if you're a baseball fan watching on YouTube and you like what you see, please like this video and subscribe to our channel to be alerted alerted to each of our weekly uploads. And if you're not yet a member, you need to join the Society for American Baseball Research, the premier baseball community. Offering an amazing baseball buffet of options to explore your fandom, SABR boasts more than 35 different research communities, over 80 regional chapters, and innumerable opportunities to connect with baseball minds across the world. For more information, go to sabr.org/join today. Tom Hoffarth, you're fantastic.
Thank you. And read Steve's book. I'm reading it right now.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes.
Appreciate the shout out on that. Thank you.
Buy these books. Buy these books. All right. Hey, thanks a lot, everybody. Let's get everybody out of here. We'll see you next week. Have a great night, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Tom.
You bet.